welcome back to Oh and Another Thing, your favorite news and politics podcast, your favorite news and politics YouTube program. Back for another Friday podcast with you. I know I promised last Friday there would be a Tuesday podcast. Well, things changed quickly, and I ended up working on Tuesday. So we're back here with Friday. Seems like it's going to be a Friday podcast going forward. Very disappointing. I'm sorry. Anyway, so welcome back to Oh and Another Thing. We have a pretty solid program lined up for you guys today. Not going to call it great quite yet. It'll be good enough. It'll be a very serviceable podcast for you today. We had some technical difficulties this morning, so if you're joining us on YouTube, you'll notice that we have one of our classic audio-only link podcasts up there for you, sponsored by our good friends over at Podbean. And by sponsored, I mean it just has their logo all over it, so that's cool. But you'll have that up on YouTube for you guys today to view and enjoy. Again, we had some technical difficulties this morning. One, a little bit of a late start. I went to the grocery store this morning when I usually would have been doing my podcast planning. Went out, got some groceries, got Bert some cat foods, some tender beef entrees. Oh, speaking of, Bertram Beans, our producer in the house. Giovanna here, fact-checking us, keeping us straight along the way. Your host, Vince Patron, back for another week. Introductions are out of the way now. We talked about buying Bert's cat food. We got some ice cream, some not microwavable, but we got some Mrs. T's pierogies that we've never made in the microwave. I don't know why I said microwavable. Yeah, why would I say microwavable pierogi when I've never, you know me. You know me. She knows me. Bert knows me. You know me. I would never microwave a pierogi. Not even in a time like this, whenever it might be, no, it wouldn't even be close to acceptable at a time like this. What am I saying? Anyway. So I was a little behind on getting things together for the pod. Then I came home and I laid back down for a minute because this was like 7:40 in the morning. So I lay back down, and I know that exactly because I told Bert, it's 7:40 in the morning. I can't feed you right now. As he was screaming at me like crazy all morning long since 4 in the morning. So I guess I could have spent that time planning, but he was bamboozling me the whole time, as is tradition. So I get back, I lay down, I end up going to sleep until about 10 in the morning. Very unlike me. I get back up, I start my planning, getting things together, I go to record. What happens? My audio driver, it disappears. Then, the audio driver is the one that my headphones, my Bluetooth would hook up to, so my Bluetooth wouldn't work, and then I couldn't get it to work any other way because the device was out of date. And then my microphone wouldn't work because the driver was out of date. So I had to go and do updates on my laptop. The updates took longer than expected. So now here we are at 4:45 in the afternoon recording while also watching opening day of yours and my New York Metropolitans baseball season. We're very excited. Jake DeGrom looks good. We're in the top of the third here. It's not going to matter in the grand scheme of things, but that is what's going on in the studio today. Woo! All right, so let's dive on into some headlines, as traditionally said, from the Washington Post. Let's dive on in. First, Dr. Birx, shout out to Dr. Birx and her many scarves, is saying that what we have, and this is a quote from her, the leading scientist now that Trump doesn't like Fauci, what we have right now are essentially 3 New Yorks with 3 major states. With these 3 major states, when speaking of coronavirus and speaking of Florida, California, and Texas. Is that right? Florida, California, and Texas? Yeah, Florida, California, Texas. Because as you know, California surpassed New York in total number of cases. They're leading now in historical sense. I know Florida's put up their banner numbers for coronavirus, but California's still outpacing everybody in total. So it's not funny, but we have to try to, you gotta laugh. Anyway, so we have 3 New Yorks, according to Dr. Birx, saying that things need to get better quickly. Dr. Fauci is today warning that places that are starting to see these spikes and see these massive jumps in cases need to pause their reopenings, or else. Fauci, who has had an interesting couple of days, in some aspects good, and in one aspect very bad. Well, I guess in both aspects kind of a little bit of bad. So he got to throw out the first pitch yesterday at the Nationals game, Nationals-Yankees opening night for Major League Baseball. And he got to throw the first pitch. Apparently a Nationals fan, diehard Nationals fan, as has been talked about before, which is very cool. I like to learn about people's sports affiliations, their fandoms. I think it's interesting to find out. I know there was speculation back with Barack Obama whether he was a Steelers fan or a Bears fan. As a Steelers fan, I was always pulling for him to be a Steelers fan, and he did wear that Steelers jersey that one time, or have that Steelers jersey that one time before the Super Bowl. So I'm still taking Obama for the Steelers. So take that, Brandon. He's the only Bears fan I know. So shout out to Brandon, being the only Bears fan I know, and whatever. Anyway. So Fauci got to throw out the first pitch, and he did not throw out a good first pitch. It was bad. I know it's not a big deal. Giovanna's giving me heck over here for Karen, but I know.
Didn't 50 Cent do like that really bad?
50 Cent did one that was iconic. You know, I was there for that.
Wow.
Me, Russell, and Brandon were there for that game. We sat in the outfield. It was really funny. That was actually the game Yoenis Cespedes. That was my first game I saw Yoenis in. Actually, they were playing the Athletics. Funny enough.
Did you say Fauci was as bad as 50 Cent?
I think 50 Cent was worse for two reasons. Well, a bunch of reasons. One, 50 Cent was like a much stronger pitch. Fauci's was a very like limp, kind of off to the side, never really stood a chance. So like you have to wonder if Fauci had ever, or when the last time he threw a baseball was, or when the last time he did anything remotely away from work was, whereas 50 Cent, and also don't forget, Fauci's an older man.
Yeah,
very small, little...
Frail.
He's not frail, I'm not trying to make him sound frail, but he's a small man. So I think 50 Cent throwing, because he's a healthy, younger, more athletically built fella, and Fauci is the exact opposite kind of fella. So I kind of give Fauci a little more leeway on that. But also, I've liked all the jokes on Twitter about how Fauci's rebranded himself to be someone who doesn't want anybody to catch anything. So he was just being on brand, which I think is very funny. And maybe he was. Maybe that was intentional. Maybe he didn't want to risk it. It was a message to all of us. That was like when they talk about Bernie leaving little hints to write him in. That was Fauci giving us little hints to whatever with him. But also, disturbingly, Fauci was also talking to one of the papers about how he's had an increased number of death threats against him and his family, so now he travels with a security detail because people hate him so much because of how terrible the president and everybody in the right-wing media ecosystem has been to him and his family. So now he has to worry for his life because he's telling people things that could help them survive the next 5 months. God forbid you try to help someone in the next 5 months, you know? Jesus Christ, what a terrible country we live in. He even asked, is this America? And I'm like, is it? I don't know at this point. And because that was a conversation we were having this morning whenever I was doing some show prep. I was going back and forth texting in the family group chat. We were talking about the Portland moms. Shout out to the Portland moms who are being protective shields for the youth behind them because they figure that the federal forces won't like try to tear gas them because they're moms, but they've been proven wrong on that because they'll tear gas even moms. So, well, I mean, you can tear gas the mayor, but can you tear gas the mayor's mom?
Yes.
Apparently so. Apparently so. But anyway, I guess I get to prove my point there. But you're right. So apparently they'll tear gas anyone. So I sent the clip to my mom, and we were having a back and forth, and I said something about how we shouldn't have to have moms go stand in lines, how we shouldn't have to have lines of mothers protecting protesters from federal forces. And shout out to my mom, but she countered with, well, they're destroying the city of Portland, and they're destroying it and tearing it down. And that's like, I understand where that comes from. This is like not a falsehood per se, not a total lie, but what people, I saw a couple of people I know from Portland that follow me on Twitter. I don't know them personally, but we follow mutual follows on Twitter from through the years, and they were talking about how it's not really that bad in Portland except for around the federal courthouse there. But aside from that, downtown Portland is pretty much still intact. The autonomous zone. Well, that was in Seattle, wasn't it? That's in Seattle.
Well, the other thing they were saying is that not.
Come on in. She's got a lot to say this week.
Because I have a couple of mutuals from Portland as well, friends I've made on Tumblr over the years. But no, I saw that a lot of times the places they're tear gassing people are not even near that courthouse that they're so concerned about. Because everyone said like they're saying, oh, it's because they want to protect the courthouse, but they were tear gassing people in the park. They were tear gassing people who weren't destroying property. I don't know if you could hear me shouting over there before, that they tear gassed the mayor, and they did an interview with the mayor afterwards, and he was like, all I can say that this is a gross overreaction towards a group of people who are at this time incredibly peaceful and not doing anything wrong. So,
and he had earlier on in all this not endorsed the use of tear gas, but said that he didn't see any problem with it at a point. So that's something to note with him. What were we talking about tear gassing for?
We were talking about the Portland.
Oh, and how it's not actually like the city of Portland has not been like destroyed by Antifa terrorists or by anybody. It's not like there's like shattered glass and like pirate flags hanging all over town or anything like that. But that's the story that's being told by Trump and the right-wing media and the GOP and Ted Cruz. That's all Ted Cruz has been talking about on Twitter. What's been really interesting with Ted Cruz on Twitter is that he says he misses everything whenever it's about the president. You remember a couple weeks ago whenever the president tweeted about what might have been the white power video. And they asked, you remember the white power video?
That feels years ago.
It feels like years ago, but that was really only, I think, like a month ago. Yeah. Maybe.
Probably less than that.
Look into that. Can you look that up, see when that video came out? Look up Donald Trump white power golf cart.
I'm looking at your podcast because I know it's the cover photo.
Was it the cover photo? Wow, how about that? It does feel like years ago. Anyway, how was I talking about that? Oh, because then they asked Ted Cruz about it, and Ted Cruz said, I didn't happen to see that. But then Ted Cruz spends his whole day on Twitter while his state is literally dying of coronavirus, talking about what Antifa terrorists are doing in Portland and what Antifa terrorists want to do to you and your families in the suburbs, and endorsing... I gotta get out of the voice there. And endorsing just what you could call random right-wing Twitter nonsense. That's just what they do on the right on Twitter. They ignore what the president does, and they do yellow journalism tactics over whatever is happening with protests or Democrats or social justice or whatever. They always find a way to overreact to it, but then whenever it comes time for them to be accountable for what their own president and their own party leadership is doing on the internet, they always find a way to have not been logged on then. And I just like to bring that out because I don't like Ted Cruz, and I think Ted Cruz is the worst of us. If I could think of one person that personifies everything I would hate about a person, it's probably Ted Cruz, because I just find him totally unbearable, spineless, annoying. He has this high-minded way of arguing on Twitter where you can tell he's someone who went to a law school that he probably shouldn't have gotten into. and you can tell whenever he's arguing with people. They say he's a very good debater, and I don't deny that. He has this way of speaking that you can see yourself just kind of start nodding along to it, even though he's totally wrong. I can see him being a good debater because he's very annoying and he doesn't shut up. That's it. That's really what it is.
If you want to call that a good debater, I would say he's willing to debate for a long time.
Willing to debate for a long time. Absolutely. You're right. Now, that's kind of what debating really is when it comes down to it, I think. I don't know. But what do you think?
He wasn't willing to debate Trump when he said that terrible thing about his wife.
Well, he wasn't going to do that because he's a coward. We covered the cowardly stuff already. Anyway, what were we talking? We were talking about Fauci. We talked about Ted Cruz. We talked about Twitter.
Because
Portland.
That's the narrative they're trying to push about
Right.
Portland. And Ted Cruz worried about the statues.
Right. And Ted Cruz is worried about the statues and all that. Whenever there's literally federal government forces going around kidnapping people in vans, and that story disappeared too soon. I know it's still out there, but that story kind of died down pretty quickly. And I know they had a press conference about that last week, and they made a big show. Or maybe that was this week. Everything feels like it was so long ago now that we only do the Friday podcast. But they were showing how you could identify these forces in your city. These like what we were calling unidentifiable or shadow government troops, whatever we were calling them last Friday, and what they still are to this Friday. But they had a press conference about how you could identify them and why, since they are technically identifiable because they have police in yellow on their chest and they wear a bulletproof vest in this kind of brown, you can tell that they're these federal forces that have been sent to your city because they have these very, 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 like, obscure markations on them. And they won't give their names on their uniforms because they're worried that people are going to go looking for all their information. But if you just put a last name on a uniform of a pretty small police force, you'll figure out who the person is, but we won't.
And how come in local police forces, when you're taking somebody, you have to read them their Miranda rights and you have to inform them of all of their rights and everything, but somehow here that doesn't apply?
Well, it doesn't apply because they're Antifa terrorists.
Oh my God. How are they determining? That's the whole thing about all of this, is that one guy, that one of the first people that they kidnapped, said he had no idea who had taken him until he had already been contained for hours. He didn't know in the car. He didn't know till he was there. Yeah, he thought it was neo-Nazis. He thought it was like alt-right people. Because that's what they came off like, and nobody told him. All they have to do is show up and announce who they are. I mean, they shouldn't kidnap in general.
They shouldn't be up there anyway.
But, like, people shouldn't have to be fearing for their lives, not knowing where they're going.
We're not supposed to have, like, well, I mean, we do have a federal army. I mean, we have the army, so that's kind of like a federal police force anyway. But I think the reason that these forces are technically allowed in right now, and please, someone, if I'm wrong on this, fact check me on Twitter. You guys know where to find me. But I'm pretty sure it was because when Trump signed the law or the executive order a couple weeks ago about federal statues protecting federal monuments and the 10-year prison sentence and all that comes along with if you tear down like an old Confederate statue or something, or spray paint it or get arrested for trying to harm federal property or whatever it is. I think that's part of that law, that he's allowed to send troops into cities to protect those federal monuments. As long as it's under the guise of that, it's technically legal. But it's not. I think that's what whenever they say extra legal, I think that's extra legal, where they like shoehorn it into the legalities. So that's what we're dealing with there. It's not great, and I know the plan is to deploy it to more cities. I know Chicago has had an interesting night last night because Mayor Lori Lightfoot said originally that she would not allow the federal forces to come into Chicago, but has now said she will allow them to come into Chicago. So it'll be interesting to see what happens in Chicago now, because we know that Chicago is a classic dog whistle for people on the right to just cry about black crime and use as an example to decry the Black Lives Matter movement, because they say that that's like the epicenter for crime, and the most unsafe city in the world is Chicago. You don't want to go to Chicago. If you're in Chicago, you're going to get killed by a gang. And that's like...
Went there, it was very nice.
You went there and had a wonderful time with your
my
mother. Almost overpaid for a Michael Jordan steak, though.
Almost. Expensive city, but fun.
If he's not slam dunking it on the grill, it's not worth it. That's my favorite joke I've probably ever told. That was always a good joke, Bert. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. Did you just lick the plant?
I don't think so.
Anyway. Bert's been interesting today. I don't know if it's because I've been back at work or not, but Bert's been hanging around a lot more.
Yeah, he loves you very much. You're his father.
He's a little man. Anyway, I gotta get back to the podcast. That's all. They know all of this now. They've heard me now. So Portland's not good. Federal police forces aren't good. They shouldn't go to Chicago. They shouldn't be in Portland. They'll probably come to New York. I'm very nervous if they come to New York. Protests are still happening nationwide. Oh, the other last point I want to make about Portland, and I think it goes to prove something about how the media has covered all the protests, and how they miscovered the effect that police had on these protests, or failed to adequately mention that when more police are added to a protest against brutal tactics used by police against black people in communities across America, when you add more police to that situation, it's never going to be a good situation, which led to the things that were happening. The police beatings in the streets, the police using tear gas and rubber bullets, the riots in the streets that were caused by the ongoing police coup for about a month and a half there were caused because more police were being pumped into a place where they were not wanted, and they felt that way, and they stirred up trouble to fight back against those feelings. It is safe to say that.
Yeah.
Everything that happened in those protests, every bit of violence, I know you'll point to but what about the looting? What about the broken store windows? What about the Rolex store that got robbed? No one cares about that because those people were caught in the end, and those people were found to have, in many cases, been working as part of white nationalist groups that were sent in to distract from the movement and take away the validity of the movement by white supremacist groups. I think that was the case for at least 3 of them, and that's the 3 that you keep hearing about. And
the Rolex store was the lie. They literally made it up because the manager of
that's
the
right.
store came out and said
there were. That's right. I forgot the Rolex store was a lie, just like Shake Shack. So let us not forget what got us to this situation and what caused these protests and these demonstrations to spill over into full violence, and it was the police coup happening in the street because the protests are still happening here in New York City. They've been happening night in and night out. They don't get the media coverage they've been getting. You don't see it on Twitter as often. I only saw one the other night because a group of protesters were marching up and down. I think it was Fifth Avenue down by the Garment. Not Fifth Avenue. That's not the Garment District. Well, I guess it can't be. Maybe they were in Chelsea. Regardless, it was pouring rain, and they had their umbrellas, but they were out. That's the only reason I saw it. But you know what I didn't see? A bunch of police bullying protesters. And I think that's why it's not a story anymore, because there isn't that chance of violence, because the people causing the violence are now gone from most of these scenarios. And that's why you see Portland getting as bad as it is, because you've pumped more police into a protest that is against the type of policing that they are literally doing right then and there. It's hypocritical, and it is what it is of the police tactics during these protests in Portland right now. And we shouldn't have to worry about people going out and protesting and getting, again, picked up by people that they think might be neo-Nazis. And I don't know if you saw this, but they pointed out that these uniforms that they've come up with for the federal agents, for Trump's goon squad or Trump's SS, whatever you want to call it, mirror what the white nationalists wore to Charlottesville. Yeah, it's like the exact same. I know it looks just like a military fatigue uniform, but it's also very similar to what they wore in Charlottesville. A couple of the white nationalist groups that were there doing all that. Those very fine people, as the president called them. What do we got here? More headlines. Moving on from all that awful stuff to some other awful stuff. With millions of people days away from losing unemployment benefits and a federal eviction moratorium about to end, a new stimulus package has been delayed. The White House has backed down from Trump's demand to include a payroll tax cut in the next coronavirus relief bill, but Republicans are still struggling with a major overhaul of the unemployment system and other aspects of the legislation. The biggest thing with the Republican Party and the biggest holdup for your unemployment benefits, if you're somebody who is still collecting your unemployment benefit and doing what you should be doing to stay home and stay safe, this is a part of the argument that drives me nuts that I just was kind of brought to light to the past couple of days. The reason, okay, people get mad because people are making $600 while other people are out working. And I understand that. As someone who is now back to work, I do understand why some people would be frustrated that people are staying at home and making $600 and are making, in some cases, more than they were making before. For starters, if you're someone who is making, or you're a business who's concerned that your employees aren't going to come back because they won't make as much money working for you as they do sitting at home on unemployment, that's on you, Fats. That's because you're not paying a living wage to these people. You're not paying a living wage to your employees and the people that staff your store and run your operation for you. So they have a better chance living and surviving off of stimulus money that is guaranteed to run out here at the end of this week. It's not an ideal situation for them either, but you played a role in it because you aren't paying them enough as it is. Number 2, we want people to stay home during this. We have seen what happens in the South because of what's happening in the South right now. Whenever people rush to get back to normal, whenever people rush to get back to work, whenever people feel as if their dignity is being violated because they have to collect an unemployment check, because they have to miss date night at Olive Garden, We've seen what has happened when that happens. Spikes in cases, spikes in death, record numbers of both across any region where they've decided to open up too soon. And it's why Dr. Fauci is saying that we shouldn't be opening up too soon. But we'll digress from that for now. So the reason people are making $600 extra on their paychecks or on their unemployment, first off, only takes them still to about 40% of their earnings. That's only 40% of what they would be making in most cases, per the Washington Post this morning. It's only 40% whenever you add in their states, what their state is contributing to them, or what their regular unemployment rate would be. So if they make $200, the government's give them $600, give them $800. I don't know if the math works on that, but it's only about 40% of their earnings that they're making back from unemployment. And that, honestly, isn't even how it should be. People should be able to get 100% of their earnings because this is an unavoidable situation. Something else that people keep mistaking is that they feel lazy for collecting unemployment. You shouldn't feel lazy for collecting unemployment right now because, again, it's a pandemic and it's not your fault. That's this right-wing GOP talking point that you're on unemployment because you're lazy, because you don't want to work, you're sitting at home collecting a check while other people are out there risking their lives for their work, risking their lives so the economy can continue on. We don't want people working right now. We don't want people going out right now. We want restaurants to have, I don't want to say that necessarily, but it's best if places are minimally staffed right now because it lowers the chances of cases having a spike again. Less people out and about, less risk. Pretty common sense. You have less people in the way of something. There was a ping pong ball video going around at the start of coronavirus, and I like to envision that whenever I'm at work because you have people, there's customers there, but it's not a ton of them. They're outside. So in theory, when I'm viewing this, the video that New York Times put out at the beginning of coronavirus of the tennis or the ping pong balls was a room full of them, and I'm only seeing like 2 lines of them in my head, and I feel safer because of that. And I think that's a better way for us all to be operating right now. And I don't think there's any shame in that. So there shouldn't be a problem with us not inspiring, but helping people be able to stay home and be safe. That's why you've seen countries like Europe get better quicker. Places like Spain and Italy get not, they're not out of the woods yet, but they're in a better situation than we are. And they've done so in a quicker manner because their people were able to stay home because their governments gave them money so they could stay home, which is what we should be doing right now. So the Republican Party's plan here is the same as it is whenever they debate a debt ceiling and they need to kick the can down the road. There's going to be a lapse. After the next $600, is this the last $600?
We get the last one. They said going out this weekend, so I assume this coming week will be the last week.
Okay, so we're on the last week for them.
I just got a text about it.
Yeah, I got my text about it too, so I have to look into that. But regardless, this was either the last one that everybody got, or this next one is the last one that everybody's getting.
This is the last one.
This is the last one everybody's getting.
The one.
Yeah. This upcoming check
last.
is the last with the extra $600 supplemented onto it. I'm telling you right now that there is a 10% chance at best that a continuation of the extra $600 gets extended by the end of this week. Absolutely 10% chance. Because the plan for Republicans is going to be to debate it with Democrats in bad faith, try to get to a point where the Democrats walk away from the negotiating table with people only getting about $400 at most each week tacked on. Their goal is to keep it to $200. That's what the president wants. He thinks that you can live off about $400 a week. That's what the belief here is, and what the corporations want us to do.
Can I add something?
Add something.
And keep in mind, for those of you who have not gotten unemployment before, you do get taxes taken out of that. So it's not $600, it's $525, which is still great and helpful. But just keep in mind, it's not like we're getting a flat $600 either. It's $525 in addition to 40% of what you got before. So they make it sound like we're out here rolling in money when really it's to pay rent and to buy groceries. And
I know that the plan Republicans have put forward it gives you $200, and it's supposed to, with an additional stimulus check, they're planning on sending another $1,200 check to everybody to get us through the next 4 months. But they say with that, the extra $200, and oh, this is ridiculous. They want to overhaul the whole unemployment system, too. They want to go in and see people's individual incomes so they can supplement based off income. So people are making up to 70% of their paycheck back, which is good. I'm not going to lie. 70% of a paycheck back is better than 40%. However, the problem is the $600 is the flat rate because it's easier to implement. The thing with the $600 is that it doesn't get everybody to above 40%, but it gets some people above 40% and some people stay below 40%. That's just the average. But it's fair to everybody. The problem is once you start supplementing wages based off income, you have to go in and recalculate your entire unemployment system for your state.
Which already most of them don't run very well.
And none of them run well. One of the people interviewed by Washington Post said that if you have the unemployment system in your state, it's likely built out of sticks, and what you're doing with this plan is throwing a match into it, which I think is a really good analogy for it because it would. You have to change every part of the system, which is going to lead to trouble getting these payments out to people. And the administration and Steve Mnuchin at the Treasury's reaction to that is, well, it'll take time to work the bugs out. But guess what? People don't have time. These rich corporatists that run our government, hear me saying corporatists, these corporatist fat cats that run our government, these capitalist pigs, these phonies, cool it, think that you have time to sit around and wait for your state to figure out how to get your proper unemployment benefit out to you. It could take up to a month in some cases for the calculations to be accurate.
And my guess would be that it'll probably take a lot longer than that because we saw with the systems in place that we have now, the unemployment systems, I know so many people who waited over a month to get their first payment, and that's with the system already functioning as it is. And now you want to go in and figure out everybody's individual amounts that they should get, and you think that that's going to be a reasonable amount of time. People aren't going to get it for months and months and months. I think they still said now in New York something like only 63% of people have received the unemployment that they've been waiting for, which is higher than the 15% that it was in March. But now you want to make it even more complicated.
And the outrageous thing is that they are doing another one of these $1,200 checks, but they're just doing one of them. Because their thought is that $1,200 should be spread amongst the 4 months that it will take for them to pass their next stimulus bill. And by the time it's time to pass the next stimulus bill, if we keep the polling in mind, in theory, this could be the last bill about coronavirus passed by the Senate if they go for a short extension, like it seems like their plan is to do. Again, it seems like their plan right now for Republicans is to extend it temporarily up to $200 extra. That's their dream plan. That's what they concocted behind closed doors with Mitch McConnell and Kevin McCarthy and all the shitty dirtbags, and on the Republican side of the ticket, Matt Gaetz, and who's that jerk from Ohio? I can't think of it. Jim Jordan. This is the best they came up with. The Kennedy from Louisiana. This is what they came up with. This is what they think you can live off of. I just wish he could run. I was just watching UNSS, but I just wish he could run fast still. Poor fellow. Anyway, so they think you can survive on that. And that's their plan, is to extend it to $200 with your whatever you're getting already with a stimulus. You'll be making 70% hopefully of what you were making before. And it'll be that way for the next 2 months, 3 months, however long they want to pass an extension for, until they can do another extension, until the stakes are higher as they get closer to election time. Then, hopefully, if the polling holds how it is and things keep on their course despite the president's new tone, they'll have a chance to pass all responsibility to a Democratic-led House and hopefully a Democratic-led Senate and a Democratic presidency, to come up with a plan to just uncover America from whatever pile of shit it's in by the time January is whenever we'll inaugurate Joe Biden, right? Hopefully. So January or February? January, hopefully, will be Biden's inauguration. To have them uncover the nation however they can, whatever bill they have to pass, however much they have to spend. And then, hopefully, that frames the argument for the midterm elections in 2 years where they can say, but look how much Democrats spent on the coronavirus, and are we any better? And that'll be their argument, and it will be effective enough for them to retake a bunch of those Senate seats and retake some of those House seats. I guarantee it. And that is their plan. The GOP is good at one thing, and it's long-term politics. And this would be a long-term politic. This would be a long game here. Kick the can down the road far enough, knowing that it's likely that you guys are going to lose your majorities and lose your controls in the November election. Hoping you won't. Hoping these bills you're passing are just enough to appease moderates and appease your Republican base. Make it look like you're doing good by the people you govern. Hopefully it works for them. Well, in their minds, hopefully it works. I don't think it's going to. Hopefully it doesn't in our minds. But then you set it up so that Democrats have to take the heat in 2 or 4 years, or both, whenever it's time for election season again, because they'll look like the people that overspent on trying to resuscitate an economy that was too dead to salvage because of their own work, but they'll forget about it. You know how short-term the Republican Party's memory is. That's why they get away with their representatives calling AOC a fucking bitch, and they just kind of let it go. Imagine if, and to shift here, to go to our next tone for this podcast, our next tone. Imagine if any Democrat had said that or something similar to any Republican. Imagine, we don't have to imagine. Remember the outrage over Matt? It wasn't even outrage, but remember the tweets about Matt Gaetz's brother? Son, the Matt Gaetz son thing.
Yeah.
Fox News and Laura Ingraham did 2 nights worth of content on that, about how unfair the left was being to Matt Gaetz and his family, and all these like right-wing publications were writing think pieces and writing op-eds about how we shouldn't persecute Matt Gaetz and his family for taking in this kid, and for Matt Gaetz calling him his son, and all this and that, and how it shows the true character of the left, that they're acting like this over a charitable act and whatever. Whenever we know that it was only brought up not to be a charitable act. We know Matt Gaetz brought this upon himself whenever he was trying to argue with Representative Richmond out of Louisiana about the risks that come along with being a black kid just walking around, the risks from police. He was trying to talk about that, so Gaetz countered with why. You try to say we don't have people of color on our side and all this stuff, and then the Sun tweet and all that. But anyway, so the right-wing media went nuts about it, but nothing about this. And there hasn't even been that much from MSNBC or CNN or any of the left-leaning national news organizations about it. A lot on Twitter made of it, and luckily AOC is an incredible politician, incredible speaker, and probably going to be president at some point here, hopefully. I didn't get to see the whole thing, but I'm told it was a beautiful speech. I've seen the clips, and she's made great points, and she's just incredible at what she does, and she brought up a lot of good points about what Yoho from Florida was really trying to do with his apology, which was not an apology. I heard his apology, because anytime someone says they won't apologize for their passion, they won't apologize for their faith, I think it's hilarious, because that is not what that was. But it's funny that you go to that, because it shows that you're not really sorry anytime you do that. It's like saying, don't persecute me. I'm just being myself. Anyway, I hate that kind of stuff. So the last thing we're going to talk about is how the new tone. We're going to talk about the president's new tone. The new tone that will last for a couple of days. I have to say, I was a little anxious about the new tone for a couple of days there whenever things were going all right. He went on Hannity last night, and he had a couple of weak moments, and he's had a couple of weak moments throughout the week, but he's been pretty good this week and pretty tethered down. I think that's because he spent the weekend getting the shit kicked out of him after his Chris Wallace interview. The Chris Wallace interview was the TV interview that should have been happening, every TV interview for the past 4 years. There's one thing I like to criticize the media on here as much as I can, I guess. But one of the things I will criticize the anchors about, because they always let the anchors do these interviews. David Muir does these interviews. What's-her-face over at CBS, Laura O'Donnell. always does these interviews, and they always let the president get away with murder in these interviews. They let him say whatever crazy thing he wants. Oftentimes, they'll steer him back in the right direction. What we saw over the weekend with the Chris Wallace Fox News interview with the president was someone who was out there trying to show the president for what he truly is, and that is someone who has no idea what he's doing with anything. And that was showcased to us by Chris Wallace in that interview. And once they got him to start talking about the cognitive test, that's when it was game over, because there is nothing the president cares more about than his image and people thinking that he is a smart, competent man. That's why he had a second interview with Fox News later on in the week where he uttered the now famous words, person, woman, man, camera, TV. The only way to tell if you're all there is to remember all 5 of those words in order. Bert? Person, woman, man, camera, TV. Exactly. And if you can get them in order, you get bonus points. So he had this whole interview, and it took him 7 minutes to talk about that in a second interview. Talk about how hard the test was and how he sought it out from Ronnie Jackson. This and that. And it takes down the president's new tone argument just from doing that second interview alone, because it doesn't matter what the president's tone is. We don't care about his tone. Well, okay, we do. He could be shitty in tone. He could be the evil emperor that he is and still have done a somewhat good job with coronavirus. Still cared about the coronavirus. But he hasn't done that until this week. Now we're seeing him care about masks. Say people should wear masks, and it's only because of where he is electorally. The new tone comes to serve him. He's not being any different than he was 2 weeks ago. Do not forget, he is still trying to repeal the ACA. Do not forget, he still has not gone after Russia. Despite having a phone call with Vladimir Putin yesterday, he still has not sanctioned Russia or done anything close to discipline against Russia for their role in the Taliban bounty program against our troops in Afghanistan. There are major things that Trump still has not addressed and still not done effectively. So this new tone is just a way to get us talking about that for a couple of days, couple of weeks maybe. Give him a bump in the polls. The problem is his new tone might be good for 2 points. But then those 2 points turn into 4 because people say, oh, well, those people are back on board. Maybe I can get back on board too. And then you have a snowball effect. And I know it's a dangerous argument to start arguing about snowball effects in the polling and whether we should worry about the polling, because obviously all polling still shows Joe Biden up pretty significantly, especially in swing states, which is great for now. But, I mean, to watch the polls move over the week is always going to be a little heart attack inducing. Biden was up 9 points last week. He's only up 7 this week, according to 538's polling average. I don't know what's changed. Could that be the president's new tone that everybody keeps talking about? Who knows? But it's dangerous to talk about the president having a new tone whenever you have a national media platform, like Rick Klein at ABC does, the guy who keeps writing about these things, like the people at CBS and NBC and MSNBC who spend time doing full segments on the president's new tone, praising him for how well he did, just because he did the bare minimum of telling Americans to wear a mask after 140,000 of us have already died because he wouldn't have people wear masks before. And then the question has to be, is why now? Are people going to listen to him now? More does he think? I don't know. But the new tone will only last us so long until the next story hits. When the next story hits, it's going to be back to old Donald again, and we'll all be able to breathe a sigh of relief, I guess. We'll have to worry about getting nuked, or the nukes going off, but we'll all be able to breathe a sigh of relief that the new tone hasn't affected us all too much, because we're in a great place again before we sign off here and go into the weekend, where I think if we get through these next 4 months, next 5, well, it's 100 days. As of Sunday, it's 100 days till the election. So if we can get through these next 100 days, if we can work hard for the next 100 days, if we can organize well for the next 100 days, do our best for the next 100 days, survive them, go and vote for Joe Biden, go and vote for Democrats up and down the ticket, we have a really good chance on an ideal society at the end of 100 days and at the end of Trump's presidency after the lame duck period at that. So, a lot to look forward to if we're just good for the next 100 days. Thank you for listening. It was nice doing the Friday pod. We hope to have you back next week for more. Oh, and another thing, have a good weekend.